G'day mates, in today's video we're going to kick off with the insanely exciting announcement that we have LAN events coming back from Fortnite. We have official epic LAN events, a lot of people calling this World Cup 2. It is going to be an invitational where they are inviting the best teams from around the world to compete in person in North Carolina. We are going to finally answer the debate, who is the best duo in the world and which region is the best. We have not been able to do this since World Cup. I'm so excited to share all the details. Obviously we also had the FNCS Grand Finals. I want to cover all the teams that dominated, who popped off, who struggled, and why. Obviously, a lot of people asking what happened to Clix and Dave, what happened to Benji and Savage, are they splitting up, what are the new teams? I'm going to talk about all of that. There's a lot to talk about. Let's just jump into it. Let's kick off with the absolutely massive announcement that Fortnite LAN events are coming back, ran by Fortnite. Yes, we have DreamHack coming up and those are super exciting, but this is a $1 million Fortnite LAN event put on by Epic Games. Let's go through what we know and what we don't know. So the announcement started off with Fortnite in-person events are back. We're excited to announce our plan to host the FNCS Invitational 2022 in person on November 12th and 13th in Raleigh, North Carolina, USA. So we know we have a LAN event that's taking place across 2 days and it's going to be an invite format, not a qualification format. As far as we know, I'm going to talk about that in a second. Also, we'll be inviting a selection of top FNCS duos from around the world who will have the opportunity to compete in a single lobby for a share of $1 million prize pool. We plan to share more details on the FNCS Invitational 2022 in the coming months. So just because of that, that is all we know. We don't exactly know who's going to be invited and why. I have to imagine it's going to be based off some form of qualification. I even went so far as to reach out to some OG pros like Zate and Chap today to get their opinion on how they used to invite pros back in the skirmish days, and it looks like that's not going to be super relevant because competitive has changed and adapted so much since then. So I have to imagine it's going to be something similar to how they did All-Stars. And if you guys remember, there actually was a qualification process for All-Stars. So they invited a bunch of players based on their placement in previous FNCSs, but then they also held tournaments to find, I think it was 10 qualifiers in each region to then play. Because it's in person, I don't know whether they will do that or whether they will just invite people, and I know that kind of upsets some people. A lot of people, when they were making this announcement, were getting super hyped for like a World Cup 2, and while this is a massive prize pool in-person LAN event where we're flying the best of the best out, because it isn't actually an open qualification from the start, I understand why people weren't as excited, but I would still argue there's so many other tournaments coming up, especially like daily duos in summer. We've got Cash Cups, they're on like every day of the week at this point. FNCS, there are so many tournaments to play in that are open to everyone. I think having a $1 million big prize pool tournament where they invite the best of the best from every region to really settle that argument of who's the best right now, because we haven't really had that since World Cup. I think that's really cool for the competitive scene. Some people weren't too happy with this announcement. I was super happy because it fills that gap we have right now in the competitive scene of who's the best in the world, which duo is the best. When they actually verse each other, who would win? Because obviously people argue, you know, EU's got more players, they've got more pros, they're the best, they would destroy NA. Nah, NA East would be so good if they went to EU. And what about the OCE pros, Volks and Luda? They just set a point record. They would smash every other pro. We don't know. We've never been able to answer that question since World Cup, and now we can. I am so ridiculously excited. Now, the way that it is a November 12th and 13th event makes me think it'll be 6 games each day, 12 games, just like FNCS Grand Finals, but it could still be the fact that they invite pros to qualify on the 12th, take the best of the best, and they play on the 13th. I don't think that's the way they'll do it, but they could very well do that as qualifiers to get to this event, because that is kind of how they did All-Stars. So unfortunately, we don't have too many more details until more comes out, but we have not only Sweden and Dallas DreamHack coming up in the next couple weeks to actually have, again, a LAN event put on by a third-party company. We now have in-game Fortnite events ran by Fortnite. This is going to be amazing to kind of answer those questions a lot of people have had about, you know, teams, you know, colluding during tournaments and sitting in calls, or people cheating and hacking and all these accusations. This is a proper competitive integrity LAN event to answer for the first time in years who is the best duo, what is the best region. I wish it was not like 5 months away because I am so incredibly hyped. I wanted to clear this one up because a lot of people are confused about what's going on with Daily Cups. Daily Cups were announced on the Hype Hour broadcast to be taking place next season. The reason I know this is because on the Hype Hour broadcast, they mentioned the Daily Cups were going to be coming back in Q2 in summer. If you don't know Q2, that is April, May, and June. And then obviously summer for the Northern Hemisphere is June, July, August. So the only month that coincides with Q2 and summer is June, which is next month, the first month of the new season. So there's a very good chance we're going to be having daily cups coming back very, very soon. Unfortunately, similarly to the LAN event, we don't actually know the formats yet. We're hoping to have those announced, I'm guessing, pretty soon into the new season. We don't know whether it's solos, duos, trios. It could be lightning cups. There could be a big prize pool. There could be no prize pool. It could be PC, could be console. Sadly, we don't know anything, but we do have a season coming up that is a summer season, so I'm really hoping Epic has pulled out all the stops with the content. We have LAN events coming back with third-party and in-person LAN events, and we have daily cups. If we get a good meta and we have something announced like late game arena, this season could really see a massive boom in Fortnite's popularity. Let's jump into talking about the results from the FNCS Grand Finals, who popped off, who struggled, and why. So kicking off with EU, we had the nail-biting, insane finish that saw Aqua and Vino take out first place on 362 points, 2 matches, 3 wins. They played insane, but going into their very, very last game, it was really, really close. They went into the last game, they got a 1 elim 8th place, and Tayson and Chapix were right at their heels, and it was actually Tayson and Chapix who took them down at the very end. But luckily for Vino and Aqua, they literally went down in next place, a 3 elim 7. So we've now seen Aqua win his first FNCS since Season X, the very first FNCS, and we just saw Vino win his first ever FNCS. You know, they were super excited. A lot of people did expect this. They were one of the favorites coming into it. They were dropping Covert and playing phenomenally well. Once Noah and Vidil decided to not drop Covert, Vino and Aqua's chances to win just went through the ceiling, and when they made endgame, they popped off. They had an average elims of 3.58, an average placement of 11.83. They played really, really well. And again, huge hats off to Tayson. Tayson would have been his 5th FNCS win, would have been Chapik's 3rd. They played so incredibly well. But as Tayson said on social media, this is the season that he really wasn't taking that seriously. So I'm pretty sure he's pretty happy with the 2nd place. It's crazy they did come 1st and 2nd from the very, very similar drop spots. We had Covert and Collider, pretty much the star of EU right now, because as you go down the list, it'll become apparent Tripburn and Thomas HD in 3rd place on 304 points. There was a pretty decent gap between Tayson, Chapix, Vino, Aqua, and then Tripburn and Thomas in 3rd. It did start to feel like a bit of a 2-horse race at the very end, but Tripburn and Thomas also dropping Covert. Then we had Mustache and Malabuka in 4th place, the People's Champs, after just a ridiculous season for both these players, especially Malabuka. Just everything he's been through, a 4th place was still a very big dub. And remember, he has moved out of Russia now. I believe Malabuka has it set up where he's able to receive the prize money. Luckily for him, because after everything, I mean, he just deserves it. They've been dominating all season, again, out of Covert. Then we had Seti and Kami in 5th, finally a team that wasn't dropping any of those 2 POIs at the Kami split. They played really, really well, and they got tied points with Mustache and Malabuka. Malabuka and Mustache actually took it out with the average elim difference. They both didn't have a win, so the next tiebreaker is average elim. Phenomenal from them. Then we had Zhu and Stompy, Vico and Jackson, Hen and Queasy, who I must shout out for having a gigantic comeback on day 2. If you guys saw, I think going into day 2, there was something like 30th place or maybe even worse, and they jumped up into a top 10 finish. They played phenomenally. Their last few games were insane. They got a 2nd, 1st, 12th, and 13th on the final day. They played so ridiculously well. Then we had Joe, NZ, Andy, and Kefi and Melody. I won't run the entire leaderboard, but obviously there were some big names that underperformed. A lot of people were confused as to why. Pink and Anas, one of the favorites, they were dropping top side of Covert. Malabuka Mustache, that was their target when they were playing aggressive, and Malabuka Mustache came out on top more often than they didn't against Pink and Anas, so unfortunately that did go against them. Then we do obviously have another team that I think a lot of people going into finals were hopeful they could pull something off, but weren't really expecting it. Benji Fishy and Mr. Savage tried to switch their drop spot away from Covert and go back into Tilted. They didn't find too much success. So a lot of people coming to me and asking me what went wrong, what happened. It just looks like they weren't playing the best, and I love Benji and Savage, and I don't think they'll be upset for me to say that. They just clearly both were not motivated this season. Savage did seem really, really sick on stream. They did have the disconnect in one of their games for Savage, and if you've been following Benji or Savage, you know they just have not been grinding or playing the game that much, and it's a similar situation for a lot of pros, and some pros seem to still be able to absolutely dominate, like Tayson, even when they're not playing that much, like Bugamira, which we'll talk about in a second, and some pros, I guess it hits them a little bit harder. It doesn't help when when you're triple contested by DKS and Bad Sniper, a team that Benji and Savage seem to always be running into, who, as you can see, in 47th place also struggled. So clearly there was something going on wrong there at the drop spot, but I don't think Benji and Savage are trying to make too many excuses. I'm guessing they're hoping for a better season next season where they enjoy the game, they can jump back in and go crazy like a lot of people know they will, because it was just not their FNCS. Moving on over to NA East, we had Peterbot and Byler hold on to their first place position after day one, and they're lucky they had that big buffer because day two was a shaky one. They did not perform anywhere near as well on day two as day one, but I don't want to put them on blast. I want to flame them. They just won FNCS. They weren't the only team. Day two on NA East was shaky. One team would drop off, they would drop down early game, then all eyes would be on Scented and Cold, Bugha Mira to pop off, then they would struggle, then one would take over. It was just a jostling at the top, and everyone was chasing after Peterbot and Byler, but they ended up closing it out by 50 points, getting the first place on 343. They did really, really well. $130,000. Now, if you haven't heard too much about Byler, he is an ex-console pro. I think he had about $30,000 earned on console, now making a big name for himself on PC. And shout out to Peterbot, also obviously coming off console, making a bit more of a name for himself recently, but this was his first FNCS as an IGL, so as the leader of the team, and they won grand finals. Yes, they were dropping Collider. Yes, they had insane loot, but on day two, Diego and Bizzle weren't happy fighting against Clarity and Slacks at Northside Sleepy for their shambles loot, only to get third-partied. They switched up the drop, started dropping on the east side of Collider, and Peterbot and Byler still held their own. Yes, they didn't have a phenomenal day two, but they still got consistent points. They came about 8th on the leaderboard for day two, and they clutched out the top place spot. We then had Cold and Scented in second place with the Scented Curse. Feels crazy to call getting second place on a major region a curse, walking away with $90,000 split. They got 293 points tying with Bugha and Miro, but because they had that one win, they won out the tie break, and they played phenomenally well. Now, Scented has gone on to social media to say he's looking for a duo. I wanted to clear up that Scented did this last season with Cold as well, and then still stuck with him and obviously dominated, so it's almost definitely an impression farm. Their second place was really good. They did have some issues here and there. They went down to some unfortunate circumstances, but overall played really, really well. Miro and Bugha, similar situation. I did talk in my video about how it was going to be hard for them to get the 4-peat, the back-to-back-to-back-to-back FNCS wins without the vehicle at Chonkers. The zones weren't too bad today, but it did make things a lot harder for them. Their last game actually ended up being a really rough one of them trying to get in this weird, second last game, they got into this weird fight for Storm Surge early when zone pulled towards Chonkers because obviously they weren't rotating as far, and they got a 0 elim 42nd, and that is the game that did cost them the second place. But at the same time, Cold and Scented had plenty of weird games as well. So like I said, that day two was a bit of a shaky one between all these teams. We had Acorn and Edgy get 4th place overall, 270 points. A really, really unfortunate last game for them. They found themselves getting cannoned on by NPen and D-Roller in the last game, who needed a big game to try to get more points up on the leaderboard. And I thought for sure Acorn and Edgy would be freaking out on social media. Acorn and Edgy actually jumped into my Twitch chat at the time. I was doing a viewing party, and they just said GG's. They needed a big game. It's unfortunate. We take 4th. We're super happy with that. And they were nothing but professional and just respectful on the timeline and on. I just want to give huge shout out to Acorn and Edgy, because that is not the response I was expecting from not just them, but almost any Fortnite pro at this point. I shouldn't be just commending them just for not complaining, but honestly, it was one of the more unfortunate ways to go down last game when you're clutching up at top 2 in FNCS Grand Finals, and they handled it like gentlemen. So respect to Acorn and Edgy for that one. Ages and Kanata had a very similar situation where last game, a really unfortunate, super aggressive early push saw them go down with a 1 elim 47. So again, I've said it a few times. NA East was shaky. It was a crazy last day of big teams going down to crazy things last minute. Then we had Joji and Rokane in 6th, DJ and Iomzo in 7th, Muzz and Avery in 8th, Pam Stu and Fatch in 9th, and then Spade and Chimp after their last FNCS top 2 getting a 10th place overall. Now, I know there's some big teams missing off that list. Biggest, most of all, would be Day and Clix. How did the NRG duo go? Unfortunately, their day 2 didn't go too much better than their day 1. They really couldn't get their surge under control, and they struggled because of it. We did end up seeing them finish out in 35th place overall, 131 points. A lot of people now speculating Day and Clix could potentially be splitting up. Clix did tweet out that he is now going to be potentially moving back into a fragger role. He said, GG's to all, got to put in 2 times the work next season, might need to become a fragger again or some. So he's referring to the fact that this is his first season now taking seriously the IGL role, the leader role, like that I talked about from Peterbot. And while I have been gassing him up heavily for the amount of skills he has increased as an IGL and how much he's learned, Clix is still one of the best fighters. And when you watch him fight at the moment, he is phenomenal. Maybe potentially just going back into focusing on being a fragger, but taking what he's learned as a leader, you know, better communication, better mentality, just playing a little bit smarter, would aid him as a fragger if he's now paired with a really good IGL. A lot of the blame is falling on Day for their placement. I did say in my video that if they were both firing on all cylinders, they would pop off, and they didn't do well. But at the same time, Clix isn't blaming Day anywhere that I can see. He is admitting that a lot of their issue was their Storm Surge, and everyone knows that. And Storm Surge, where you go to get your damage early game, usually relies on the IGL. It is a combination of the drop spot they're going. It is an edge map drop. It's a bit tougher, but no excuses there. They could have found the Surge, and I don't think it was an issue of preparation. Clix did do a lot of work coming into this with coaching and really tried to buckle down, but it's unfortunate to see he still struggles. So I don't see him blaming maybe potentially going back and becoming a fragger and leaving all that to someone else and then just focusing on his mechanics and being a little bit smarter. It was unfortunate to see with so many eyes on them, but ultimately I feel like they've handled it well. Clix just seems very disappointed. He wants to keep going, and I guess we'll see how the Cash Cup goes tomorrow. Will they be playing together tomorrow? We'll have to see. I know I don't normally talk about Middle East too much in my videos. It's just too hard to follow so many regions, but even this one, I had to give it the credit it's due. King's Cruel and Metal Asta 1X winning the Middle East FNCS on 394 points. I know you're thinking, Ozzy, that doesn't seem that spectacular. It is when you realize that Metal Asta 1X got his first earnings in a Duo Cash Cup a month ago and now wins FNCS Grand Final. He has gone from never having earned in an event until last season to now winning FNCS. And I know Middle East is interesting when it comes to earning money because obviously similar to smaller regions, they don't give prize pools out until you get right up the very top. So he has been placing consistently. I don't act like he hasn't placed at all, but going from getting your first earnings to winning FNCS in one season, I don't think that's ever happened. I wanted to shout it out, and I did hear in my Twitch chat that he credited this to Destiny Jesus. If you guys don't know, Destiny Jesus, one of the most famous coaches in Fortnite, does have a masterclass, which is basically like a coaching guide where it teaches you guys how to get better at Fortnite. And apparently the ultimate testimonial, if you get it, you'll go from never having earned to winning FNCS. Just absolutely ridiculous. Over on OCE, we almost had the match point. If you guys don't know, it is a new rule in Fortnite where if a team gets 475 points or more and 3 wins or more, the tournament ends right there. Match point is called and the tournament is over. We had Volks and Luda end on 518 points. They had 12 matches played, but only 1 win. But they had an average elims of 6.42 and an average placement of 5.17. Volks and Luda are just obviously one of the most dominant duos we've seen in any region ever. Luda coming back from his trip in NA, coming back to OCE and just absolutely dominating with Volks. It was ridiculous to watch. Alex and Bailey, who came in second, got 436 points. They had 12 matches, 2 wins, an average elims of 5.67 and an average placement of 11.58. And they didn't win. It just goes to show how ridiculously dominant Volks and Luda are. Again, I'm not the biggest fan of the match point system. I've talked about this before. It just doesn't really achieve anything for me. At that point, you've already won the tournament. It only seems weird to then have the tournament end so other people who had a chance to come back and have a big game and earn more money don't get to. So I'm kind of happy it didn't go to match point, but I had to shout out just how ridiculously insane that performance was. Tui and Fisher in third place had 307. So like 130 points separated second from third, and then we had another like 80 points separating first from second. Just absolutely ridiculous performance. NA West has 2 new kings. We have Fabs and Snacky winning 2 FNCSs in a row now for duos. Technically 3 if you don't count Grand Royale, with Fabs and Snacky winning trios with Reed. They finished on 414 points, 12 matches, 2 wins. They played so phenomenally well. They ended up beating out Rex and Reed by over 50 points, who also played phenomenal with a massive comeback on day 2. And then you have to, of course, imagine Arkham and Epic Well can't be too far behind in third place on 354. Now, Favs and Snacky were struggling throughout the qualifiers. It came down to heats to qualify for them. They didn't qualify through any of the qualifying finals despite making all of them, and then won a game in heats. So you're probably imagining what happened. Well, they switched their job spot. They ended up going Collider, and when you're as good as Favs and Snacky, especially Snacky's fragging ability, you give them Collider loot, it is going to be a recipe for success. They absolutely popped off. Favs has been known to now be a Valorant player, hardly playing Fortnite, but still absolutely dominating alongside Snacky. Rex and Reed, I have to give them credit as well. They were going Greasy, and Reed and me have been locked in a battle on streams where I've been saying Greasy is one of the best drops. He was saying how it wasn't as good as what I was saying, but Reed also did get really unlucky. You probably heard it. He was saying he didn't get a single pad out of Greasy on day one. They couldn't find any pads at Greasy. I was making fun of him that he had everything else he needed, but to his credit, when Reed and Rex got pads on day two, they won. They basically won or got a top 5 finish if they got pads. Their last few games were insane. They got a 9 elim win, an 8 elim win, and a 6 elim 6th on the last day, bringing it back and almost taking it home. Going into the last game, it was close. There was only about 20 points in it, but Favs and Snacky dominated their last game with a 7 elim 7th to close it out, but NA West was exciting. Then we had Bacon and Zookies. Now remember, Bacon is actually an NA East pro, decided to play on NA West because he couldn't find a teammate to play with on NA East, and then ended up coming fourth in his first ever FNCS Grand Final. Then we had Elysian Dragon, Pars and Rays. Pars and Rays got 200 of their 277 points on day two. We had Evol and On One, Vanillas and Wavy Jacob, Keto and Russo, and Nigel and Angel. Wasn't able to watch it, but I did want to give a shout out to Runa1X and Walltaker7. Now, I believe that obviously isn't their name. I'm guessing that is going to be a reference to Scented, who won out on Asia, 350 points, winning out Asia by a single point over Alice and Wixie. So super close finish to Asia. I think the closest of any region. Didn't get a chance to watch that, but clearly was a very exciting finish. All right, guys, that does it for another video. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, please chuck a like on it. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next one.